Visit parthikachana.com for technology resources and stock analysis. List of 50 advanced level design patterns interview questions with detailed answers. 1. How do design patterns relate to software architecture? Answer. Design patterns can be used to implement architectural patterns and principles, such as MVC, layered architecture, and microservices. 2. What are some trade-offs to consider when using design patterns? Answer. Trade-offs include increased complexity, potential performance overhead, and the need for careful implementation. 3. How can design patterns help with code maintainability and extensibility? Answer. Design patterns can improve code maintainability by promoting modularity, reusability, and consistency. They can also make code more extensible by providing a flexible structure. 4. Explain the virtual constructor pattern. Answer. The virtual constructor pattern allows you to create objects of different classes without explicitly specifying their type at compile time. 5. How does the prototype pattern relate to the abstract factory pattern? Answer. The prototype pattern can be used in conjunction with the abstract factory pattern to create families of related objects that can be cloned. 6. What is the difference between the adapter and bridge patterns in terms of their intent? Answer. The adapter pattern changes the interface of an existing object, while the decorator pattern adds new responsibilities to an object without changing its interface. 7. Explain the bridge pattern in the context of a graphics library. Answer. The bridge pattern can be used to decouple the abstraction of graphical objects from their implementation, allowing for flexibility in rendering and platform-specific optimizations. 8. What is the difference between the chain of responsibility and mediator patterns in terms of their communication mechanisms? Answer. The chain of responsibility pattern passes a request along a chain of handlers, while the mediator pattern centralizes communication between objects. 9. Explain the visitor pattern in the context of a compiler. Answer. The visitor pattern can be used to define operations to be performed on a hierarchy of objects without modifying the objects themselves. This is useful for adding new features to a language without modifying existing code. 10. What is the difference between the state and strategy patterns in terms of their focus? Answer. The state pattern focuses on changing an object's behavior based on its internal state, while the strategy pattern focuses on changing an object's algorithm at runtime. 11. You're designing a system to handle real-time collaboration and synchronization between multiple users. How would you use design patterns to ensure consistency and performance? Answer. Consider using the observer pattern for real-time updates, the mediator pattern to coordinate communication, and the command pattern to represent user actions. 12. How would you implement a system to handle complex event processing, CEP, using design patterns? Answer. Use the observer pattern for event subscriptions, the chain of responsibility pattern for event processing pipelines, and the strategy pattern for different event processing rules. 13. You're designing a system to manage user profiles and preferences across multiple devices. How would you use design patterns to ensure consistency and synchronization? Answer. Consider using the singleton pattern for a central user profile manager, the observer pattern for profile updates, and the strategy pattern for different synchronization methods. 14. How would you implement a system to handle data migration between different databases or systems using design patterns? Answer. Use the strategy pattern for different migration strategies, the adapter pattern to adapt data formats, and the composite pattern to represent complex data structures. 15. You're designing a system to handle large-scale data processing and analysis. How would you use design patterns to optimize performance and scalability? Answer. Consider using the flyweight pattern to reduce memory usage, the strategy pattern for different processing algorithms, and the composite pattern to represent complex data structures. 16. How would you implement a system to handle natural language processing, NLP, tasks using design patterns? Answer. Use the strategy pattern for different NLP algorithms, the composite pattern to represent language structures, and the observer pattern to notify components of language processing results. 17. You're designing a system to handle machine learning models and their deployment. How would you use design patterns to ensure flexibility and maintainability? Answer. Consider using the strategy pattern for different machine learning algorithms, the composite pattern to represent model pipelines, and the observer pattern to monitor model performance. 18. How would you implement a system to handle real-time analytics and reporting using design patterns? Answer. Use the observer pattern for real-time data updates, the mediator pattern to coordinate data processing, and the strategy pattern for different reporting formats. 19. You're designing a system to handle microservices architecture. How would you use design patterns to ensure interoperability and scalability? Answer. Consider using the adapter pattern to adapt communication protocols, the mediator pattern for service discovery and coordination, and the observer pattern for event-driven communication. 20. How would you implement a system to handle graph databases and graph algorithms using design patterns? Answer. Use the composite pattern to represent graph structures, the visitor pattern for graph traversal, and the strategy pattern for different graph algorithms. 21. You're designing a system to handle real-time video streaming. How would you use design patterns to ensure quality of service and scalability? Answer. Consider using the observer pattern for real-time updates, the mediator pattern to coordinate streaming components, and the strategy pattern for different streaming protocols and codecs. 22. How would you implement a system to handle recommendation engines using design patterns? Answer. Use the strategy pattern for different recommendation algorithms, the composite pattern to represent user preferences and item attributes, and the observer pattern to update recommendations based on user behavior. 23. You're designing a system to handle big data processing using distributed computing frameworks. How would you use design patterns to ensure scalability and fault tolerance? Answer. Consider using the MapReduce pattern for data processing, the observer pattern for distributed coordination, and the chain of responsibility pattern for data processing pipelines. 24. How would you implement a system to handle edge computing and IoT devices using design patterns? Answer. Use the observer pattern for real-time data updates from IoT devices, the mediator pattern to coordinate communication between devices and cloud services, and the strategy pattern for different device management strategies. 25. How would you implement a system to handle blockchain technology and distributed ledgers using design patterns? Answer. Consider using the observer pattern for consensus mechanisms, the chain of responsibility pattern for transaction validation, and the composite pattern to represent blockchain structures. 26. You're designing a system to handle augmented reality, AR, and virtual reality, VR, applications. How would you use design patterns to ensure performance and user experience? Answer. Consider using the observer pattern for real-time updates, the mediator pattern to coordinate rendering and input, and the strategy pattern for different rendering techniques. 27. How would you implement a system to handle natural language generation, NLG, using design patterns? Answer. Use the strategy pattern for different NLG algorithms, the composite pattern to represent language structures, and the observer pattern to generate text based on data inputs. 28. How would you design a system to handle real-time collaboration and synchronization between multiple users? Answer. Consider using the observer pattern for real-time updates, the mediator pattern to coordinate communication, and the command pattern to represent user actions. Here are 23 advanced level design patterns interview questions and answers, starting from question 29. 29. What is the role of the composite pattern, and in what scenarios would it be most beneficial? Answer. The composite pattern is used to treat individual objects and compositions of objects uniformly. It allows clients to work with single objects and groups of objects in the same way. This pattern is beneficial when dealing with tree structures, such as GUI components, file systems, or any hierarchical structure where you want to allow clients to interact with complex structures without needing to differentiate between individual and composite objects. 30. Explain the role of the flyweight pattern in optimizing memory usage and performance. Answer. The flyweight pattern is used to minimize memory usage by sharing common parts of state between multiple objects. It is particularly useful when dealing with a large number of similar objects, such as in graphical applications where many shapes may share the same properties. By storing shared state externally and passing it to the objects that require it, the flyweight pattern reduces memory overhead and improves performance by reducing the number of instantiated objects. 31. How does the command pattern facilitate undo functionality in applications? Answer. The command pattern encapsulates a request as an object, thereby allowing for parameterization of clients with queues, requests, and operations. This encapsulation allows the implementation of undo functionality by maintaining a stack of commands executed. When an undo action is triggered, the application can pop the last command from the stack and invoke its undo method, reverting the state to its previous configuration. 32. Describe a scenario where the strategy pattern would be advantageous in a payment processing system. Answer. In a payment processing system, various payment methods such as credit cards, PayPal, and cryptocurrency may be used. By employing the strategy pattern, the system can define a family of payment algorithms strategies that can be interchanged at runtime. This design allows the application to switch payment methods dynamically based on user choice or application state without modifying the client code, thus adhering to the open/closed principle. 33. Explain the concept of the interpreter pattern and provide an example of its application. Answer. The interpreter pattern defines a representation for a language's grammar and an interpreter that uses this representation to interpret sentences in the language. An example is in creating a simple expression language where expressions can be parsed and evaluated. This pattern is useful in scenarios such as parsing configurations, expression evaluation in calculators, or scripting languages where you need to interpret and execute a specific set of instructions. 34. How can the memento pattern be utilized to implement state restoration in applications? Answer. The memento pattern allows an object to capture its internal state without exposing its structure, enabling the restoration of the object to that state later. This is particularly useful in applications with complex objects where you want to provide undo/redo functionality. By storing a memento object that captures the state, the application can restore the object's state without needing to expose its internal structure. 35. In what situations would you recommend using the template method pattern? Answer. The template method pattern is recommended when you have a common algorithm structure that varies in certain steps. For instance, in data processing applications where different data sources, like CSV, XML, or JSON, require different parsing methods but follow a similar overall process. By defining the template method in a base class and allowing subclasses to override specific steps, you promote code reuse and adhere to the DRY principle. 36. Describe how the observer pattern can be implemented in a stock market application. Answer. In a stock market application, the observer pattern can be used to notify clients about changes in stock prices. The subject, e.g., stock ticker, maintains a list of observers, e.g., clients watching specific stocks. When a stock price changes, the subject notifies all registered observers, allowing them to update their displays or take action based on the new information. This promotes a loose coupling between the data source and the clients. 37. What are the benefits of using the decorator pattern and when should it be applied? Answer. The decorator pattern provides a flexible alternative to subclassing for extending functionality. It allows behaviors to be added to individual objects dynamically without affecting other objects of the same class. This pattern is particularly beneficial in scenarios like graphical user interfaces, where components can be decorated with additional features, like borders or colors at runtime, promoting adherence to the single responsibility principle. 38. Explain how the proxy pattern can be useful in implementing lazy loading. Answer. The proxy pattern acts as a surrogate for another object to control access to it. In implementing lazy loading, a proxy can be created that holds a reference to the actual object but only initializes it when a method is called that requires the object's presence. This can improve performance by deferring resource-intensive operations until they are absolutely necessary, making it ideal for scenarios where loading data is costly or involves network calls. 39. How would you apply the builder pattern to construct a complex object, like a meal? Answer. The builder pattern is useful for constructing complex objects step by step. In the context of a meal, A meal builder class could be designed with methods for adding components such as appetizers, main courses, and drinks. Each method returns the builder itself, allowing for fluent interface. Once all components are added, the builder can provide a build method that returns the final meal object, encapsulating the construction logic and promoting code readability. 40. What is the difference between the facade pattern and the adapter pattern? Answer. The facade pattern provides a simplified interface to a complex subsystem, allowing clients to interact with the subsystem through a single entry point. In contrast, the adapter pattern is used to convert the interface of one class into an interface that the client expects, allowing incompatible interfaces to work together. While both patterns simplify interactions, the facade focuses on providing a unified interface, whereas the adapter focuses on converting interfaces. 41. How can the chain of responsibility pattern improve request handling in a web application? Answer. The chain of responsibility pattern allows multiple handlers to process a request without the sender needing to know which handler will ultimately process it. In a web application, this can be used to route HTTP requests through a series of filters or middleware components, where each component can either handle the request or pass it along the chain. This decouples the request handling logic from the client, enhancing flexibility and maintainability. 42. Provide an example of how the state pattern could be used in a media player application. Answer. In a media player application, the state pattern can manage the various states of playback, such as playing, paused, and stopped. Each state can have its own behavior for methods like play, pause, and stop. By encapsulating the state-specific behavior in separate state classes, the media player can easily switch between states without extensive conditional logic, promoting cleaner and more manageable code. 43. Describe a scenario where the Data Access Object, DAO, pattern would be beneficial. Answer. The DAO pattern is beneficial in applications that require interaction with a database. For example, in an e-commerce application, iProductDAO could encapsulate all data access logic related to products, such as retrieving product details, updating stock levels, or deleting products. This separation of concerns allows for easier testing, as the DAO can be mocked, and promotes cleaner code by isolating database logic from business logic. 44. How does the null object pattern prevent null reference exceptions? Answer. The null object pattern provides a default behavior for instances where a class would typically return null. Instead of returning null, a null object instance is returned that implements the same interface, but has no effect when its methods are called. This pattern helps to avoid null reference exceptions by ensuring that the client code can operate on objects without needing to perform null checks, simplifying the code and making it more robust. 45. What is the role of the specification pattern in defining complex business rules? Answer. The specification pattern allows for the creation of reusable business rules that can be combined and reused across different entities. Each specification encapsulates a criterion and can be combined using logical operations like and, or, and not. This pattern is particularly useful in applications where business rules may change frequently, allowing for more flexible and maintainable code that adheres to the open/closed principle. 46. Explain how the iterator pattern can enhance the navigation of collections. Answer. The iterator pattern provides a way to access the elements of a collection without exposing its underlying representation. By using an iterator, clients can traverse the collection in a consistent manner regardless of its implementation, e.g., array, list, tree. This pattern is particularly useful in scenarios where multiple ways to traverse a collection are needed, or when the underlying structure may change over time, promoting separation of concerns. 47. How can the registry pattern be utilized for managing application services? Answer. The registry pattern maintains a centralized registry of services that can be easily accessed throughout an application. For example, in a microservices architecture, a service registry can keep track of available services and their endpoints. This allows different components to discover and interact with services without hard-coding dependencies, improving modularity and making the application easier to manage and scale. 48. In what ways can the adapter pattern help integrate legacy systems with modern applications? Answer. The adapter pattern facilitates integration between legacy systems and modern applications by converting the interface of the legacy system into a format that the modern application can understand. For example, if a legacy system exposes a set of APIs that differ in structure from the current application's expectations, an adapter can be created to translate requests and responses, allowing seamless interaction without requiring extensive changes to either system. 49. Describe how the observer pattern can be used to implement event-driven architecture. Answer. In event-driven architecture, the observer pattern allows various components to subscribe to and respond to events asynchronously. When an event occurs, the publisher, subject, notifies all registered observers, which can then react accordingly. This decouples event producers from consumers, enabling greater flexibility and scalability in the system, as new observers can be added without modifying existing code. 50. How can the service locator pattern simplify dependency management in an application? Answer. The service locator pattern provides a central point for managing service instances and dependencies. Instead of components creating their own dependencies, they can request them from the service locator, which manages the lifecycle and configuration of services. This simplifies dependency management, promotes loose coupling, and enhances testability, as services can be easily mocked or replaced during testing without affecting client code. Thank you for watching. Like, share, and subscribe. Visit parthakachana.com for technology resources and stock analysis.